Hello everyone, so today's lesson is going to be on the OCR spec and we're going to be looking at secondary storage. This series is all to do with the most efficient way of taking notes for the computer science spec. Now, it might not cover absolutely everything, but it's just trying to give you points in the most efficient way possible so that you can maximize your marks. And it's just hopefully going to streamline your revision and make it a lot easier for you to get the top grades. The spec points that we're going to look at today is going to be all to do with secondary storage. And for each of these, what you have to do is you have to know advantages and disadvantages relating to these points down here. Now, I'm not going to cover all of them for each of the different categories of secondary storage. The reason being is because that isn't the most efficient way of learning. I'm going to show you a longer style question because this topic, it does allow you to get an 8 marker on it. I'm going to show you, as I said, going with our thing, the most efficient way to do this. So first of all, let's just cover what secondary storage is and what each of these different ones mean. So the first question you could get is just describe and give an example of secondary storage. So non-volatile permanent storage. Remember, non-volatile means that when it loses power, it still remembers all of the data on it from before, and it's just where you store your files and application when not in use by the computer. The examples of these would be solid state, magnetic, and optical, and they might just get you to put the categories of them in a state question. Now, for each of these, what I'm going to do, so for optical, magnetic, and solid state, as I said, most efficient way possible. What I want you to do is I want you to think about having an example, having an advantage, and having a disadvantage of each of these. And then we're going to relate this at the end to a longer style 8 mark question. The reason for this is to get the top marks on the 8 marker, you only need to have 1 advantage and 1 disadvantage for each of these. So we're trying to do it in the most efficient way possible. Optical, the examples of this are CDs and DVDs. The advantages of this is CDs and also DVDs, and if you just said optical, that's fine as well, are very portable. The disadvantage of this is it's scratched and damaged very easily. Going on to magnetic, we've got the hard disk drive, or HDD, you can put either. We've got the advantage of this is that it's a very large storage capacity for the cost of the item. So for the cost, you get a huge amount of storage space on there. The disadvantage of this is it's not that portable and it's easy to damage as it has moving parts. Some people like to put in there as an example that they say it has moving parts as a disadvantage. If you put it just as it's by itself, you will not get enough to get the full marks on this question. So make sure you back it up and say it's easy to damage because of those moving parts. Now, one of the questions that you could get is they'll give you a scenario and ask you to say what you think in terms of which storage medium you would use. The only situation that I can think that you would use a magnetic over solid state, because solid state is kind of whatever is used for all of them. Optical I probably would use for no situation, and I have seen no question ever come up that you would suggest optical over these. Let's say the scenario is a company that has a smaller budget but needs something to store its backups on. So these backups is done maybe when everybody's gone home. Magnetic, the cost of it in comparison to solid state for the capacity you get is much cheaper. So in this situation, I would potentially say that you would use magnetic over solid state. For solid state, the examples of this, which is kind of what everyone's using more and more nowadays, is SD cards, USB sticks, and solid state drives. The advantages of this is fast read and write speeds. Pretty much they've got all of the advantages in terms of fast read and write speeds. There are other ones, highly durable, highly portable. The only real disadvantage of this, though, is it's expensive in comparison to the others for the amount of storage that you get. That's the only real disadvantage. And remember, what we need to do is we just need 1 advantage and 1 disadvantage because we're trying to give you as little as possible to remember. Now, on this question here, for an 8 marker, let me talk through the structure of this so that you can see how you can access the full 8 marks. So it's giving you a scenario, which is Jim is a photographer and needs to buy a new piece of secondary storage to store all of his data on. Discuss all of the secondary storage categories and explain which you would recommend. Now, with this, and what I would like you to do after this is read through what I've written. You need to talk about when it says discuss, you need to talk about an advantage and a disadvantage of each secondary storage category. If you only talk about one or two of them, the maximum you can probably get is a middle mark band, which would be a 5 to 6. If you talk about all of them and also make a really good case of it's a flowing argument, which is advantages and disadvantages, if you've talked about all 3 categories, you'll be in the top mark band, which is 6 to 8. And then based on what the examiner has said, what they've read, and whether they feel that your points are good, they will then put you higher in the top mark band, which could be the 7s and the 8s. So as you can see, I'm always relating it to the question. I'm always relating it, saying that Jim, he needs to use CDs because he could use CDs because they're portable, and photographers are moving around a lot. What I see a lot of students do is they make a generic point about it, so CDs, but they won't relate it to the actual question. So make sure you get that sentence, that application point, because that's a big part where people miss lots of questions. So if you have a look at this, see the way I've related to the question, see how I've covered everything, and see how I've put an advantage and disadvantage. It's relatively straightforward if you follow that structure, talking about optical, magnetic, and solid state. You can really easily access those top marks.